We have another episode here of the Common Chord, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Sheila Yant. I want to go back to where I first met Sheila, was a year and a half ago at BCMC. I happened to talk to Sheila, and we ended up talking for about 20 minutes, and it was just a great conversation going all over the place. And I said, at some point, we need to sit down and be on camera and record an episode. And I'm just so glad that we finally get the opportunity to do that.
Me too. I'm excited about it.
We've got a Truss in the background. I think you have Truss earrings on. Is that what I see?
Oh,
as
I
well?
do. And of course, that is actually the Truss ring that I own right there.
I love it. I love it. That's great.
So I'm pretty ate up with it. Yeah.
Before we jump into some of the different things that I wanted to talk about, I want to hear a little bit about your background. Give the listeners a little bit of an idea of your experience and where you've been.
My father started one of the first truss plants in Southeast Missouri. I was just thinking the other night, that has been a little over 52 years ago. I'm 63 now, so I literally have grown up with it. When we didn't use computers, when we did everything by hand, when we bought connector plates from a company called Hydro Air, which was before Mytech. You know, Mytech came about because of Hydro Air and gang nail merging. Thing with, you know, scale, a pencil and graph paper, to now we build these ginormous houses, you know, with computers. And because of the software that all of you guys are developing has made this career of being a truss designer, you know, very, very good career. It's just a lot of people don't know about yet.
You can trace back all the different iterations of the technology, not only at the hardware level, but then probably also at the software level, how different companies have done different things to innovate. And so now in your current role, what do you do day to day?
So day to day, I work for Trussworks. I work for IPB, which is a division of Trussworks, and I do all my training mostly online. I sometimes will have people come to me to do training, but most of it's online. So we in the IPB division, we sell connector plates to the smaller truss plants. And you know, the one that can't buy an 18-wheeler full of connector plates. So they can only buy maybe 10 boxes here and 10 boxes there. So we service that clientele. And then of course they get designers, and you know, they hire a new guy and he needs, you know, the software set up, he needs some training. I prefer they come to me, because when they come to me, I at least spend one day out on job sites. We just go all over the city looking for job sites, pointing out different things that they see when I'm training them. But once they see it live, it's like a light bulb moment. They're like, oh, now I understand why that girder is there. Or, oh, now I understand why that scissored ceiling, you know, it's important for that interior wall. So day to day, that's what I do.
I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes, but what is some of the more interesting changes that you've seen in the last 15, 20 years?
Well, it's really kind of funny. I was talking with a friend of mine the other day, and I said, you know, I don't know that I could hand calculate load to save my soul now, because it's been so long since I had to do it. You know, I mean, I really have to make my old noggin think about it. And because we have the software that does it, you know, and complicated roofs that I remember, you know, in my younger years when I would have to really think about, or go out on a concrete floor. Our building was 200 by 200, and chalk, you know, take a chalk line and chalk it out and see where, you know, okay, this hip set on this wall has a brick ledge, but on that wall it doesn't have a brick ledge, but yet, you know, or it's a 612 pitch on this end and an 812 pitch on this end. Where's that going to be? Because it's not a true 45. Where now, I mean, you put it in the software, you say soffit adjust, bam, it changes the heels. Life is good. I don't have to think about it. Those are the things that I don't think the generation now that does design work that didn't do it 20 or 30 or 40 years ago comes to appreciate, because all of that, which took hours upon hours to have to do, and not only that, but the skill, and where now they just push a couple buttons and they get it. But it's still important that where my big thing is, it's important that they understand when they push those buttons, what they're getting, why they're getting it,
Yep.
and how it came about. Because how do they know if they're right or wrong? And that's the important thing. You know, if you're going to build a set of trusses that's $100,000 worth of trusses, and you made one little mistake, especially hip sets, if you don't know what you're doing, even though you know where the buttons are, that's where the errors come in. It's really, it costs a lot of money then on the end.
Absolutely. And I think there's so many facets of it because it is actual material. You're not just dealing with something that shows up on a screen. You're dealing with wood that's delivered and assembled and manufactured. The stakes are so much higher. So you have to know, not only, oh, this is right, but what are the things that you can catch when you have something that's wrong, and looking out for those little things that may be easy to look over if you're not trained and if you're not focused on making sure it's 100% correct.
3D, when 3D came into the marketplace, oh Lord, we were so excited because you go along and you think you've got everything done and you look in 3D and all of a sudden a truss going from right to left instead of left to right, it's sticking up out of the roof and you go,
Yeah.
I missed that one,
Yeah.
So yeah, 3D was probably, I would say, not only for myself, but most all designers I know, 3D is just, it's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I'm curious from your perspective, you're in the training world and you're focused on, trying to help other people learn and get into the industry. How do you approach professional development for yourself and for the rest of you that are kind of in that training side of things?
That's a great question. And I will tell you, I think one of the ways I do it, and I kind of ran into this situation the other day, is from all of my years being a prior tech, with other software companies, is I literally try to break the software. Like I
Yeah.
go in there and push it to its limit. I put a scissor on this side and an attic on that side. And now the attic truss is, the attic opening's got to be on the left hand side and the scissor on that. And we don't have a wall, push it, push it, push it, push it to see how far I can get it to do what I want it to do. And I love it when my customers call me and they go, "Hey, I can't get this to do this. Can you jump on?" Because I have TeamViewer and I'll jump on with them and I'll poke around and poke around. And I might even say, poke around on that a little bit longer. And so it's really poking the software, which is,
Yeah.
that's a great thing. You need people poking the software because if you don't try to break it, you really don't advance it. And I even do that in training. When I'm training someone, I always tell them, because my training's remote, I say, okay, now listen, pay attention to me, because today what I train you, tomorrow you will train it back to me. And they'll go, oh, okay. And I said, yeah, I know. You were sitting there doing 10 million other things, not paying attention to me. Let's not waste our time together. And it's
Yeah.
amazing the next day how they'll say to me, oh, I knew I got to this point and I knew it. I just couldn't figure it out. I'm like, hey, I expect that. You're not supposed to know how to do the whole thing in one day, but at least you paid attention to them. And that's
Yeah.
important.
Absolutely. And really understanding that difference between I can click the buttons, I can even get maybe a certain result at the end. We're looking for the roof to do this and it does that, all the way to uh, I know why it did it and now I'm going to change it because I understand that that's a better way to set it up, or I'm going to speed up my workflow because I found these shortcuts. I kind of laugh occasionally. I've got an intern and they'll be using the computer and they're young. It's funny how you look at the generation below you and you think they're so tech savvy, but sometimes they miss some of those things like keyboard shortcuts or some of the fast ways of doing things because they didn't have to struggle through when they didn't have some of those tools that were really easy touch or super friendly UX or UI. That I learned a lot of those keyboard shortcuts to try to help speed up those things. And so I'm finding myself just piping in with, hey, did you know you could do that with, you could use a few of these shortcuts, even just getting to the point where you practice those things on purpose. You practice getting faster at your craft or at your trade. Those things help as you're learning it because those eventually those are the things that are going to stick and
Right.
hopefully be like second nature.
True. Well, I was going to say, like, having some on the job training or being able to go out to those job sites. I mean, I get customers call me all the time. Hey, we want to do this. What do you think about that? And I think a lot of that goes back to all of my years having to be on those job sites or going out to those job sites. And so I think that that's a great way to look at it. I mean, they don't have some of that background, but it's very important that our generation and the knowledge that we have, we need to pass that on to them.
You're doing a lot of that hands-on by training, and then I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the structural component academy and how that fits into it, and the work you're doing there, because I know you've got a few irons in the fire as far as what you're doing on the training side, so I'd love to hear
Well,
about that.
the Structural Component Academy idea came up several years ago. Um, and it was a project that a mentor, a class that I had taken with her, and it was a year-long project of different things that we had to do. And we all had in this group, we had to come up with a business idea, business model. And, she would help us get it, kind of frame it and everything. And once that business model was profitable, then we had to give 10% of it away, whether it be a charity, to help do something or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I have handicapped twin boys, one of which has passed away, but I still have a son that lives in a special care center. And I always wanted to build a building there that, could help, because if you've never been in that world, you don't know what it's like, and they don't get help, and they don't, those people don't get paid good money. And I always wanted to do something, and I couldn't think ever of what I wanted to do. And I had a customer send a young kid to me and for a whole week to do some training. And we went out to job sites and everything. When he got back, I called his uncle and I said, so, how did it go? Because this kid was real shy. And he said, oh my gosh, it was amazing. It was just such an eye opener for him. And it dawned on me, how kind of God will like knock at you and go, I've been trying to tell you. Well, he's like, this is what this is the vehicle. And so I started working on it, and I just started doing and taking what I knew and how I like to train and kind of meshing it all together. And like I said, it's been several years of pulling it together. But the program is basically for anyone. I mean, I don't care if you're a 16-year-old kid or an 18-year-old kid. It is not software based. So it's not like we're teaching Paragon software or any of the other, connector plate
Yeah.
softwares. What this program is it's more fundamental based. It's what do you need to know about a truss before you ever go to that truss plant? Because our problem is trying to find truss designers now, we don't teach it anywhere. So unless you go to a truss plant and become employed by them, you never get to touch the software. Well, I'm sorry, but there ain't an individual I know that ever woke up one morning and said, hey, I think I'll be a truss designer today. They might be electrical, HVAC, but not a truss designer. And they don't know that this is such a great career. So we laid the modules out where the first 8, we start out with a box, simple little box. Most every plan is made up of boxes. And every module builds on that until we go clear up to some of the plans. There's about 20 plans in the whole program. Gets up to I think 10 or 12 hips on one building with several wall heights and several ceiling changes. So we walk them through half of that, because if you learned it in the beginning, you should know it at the end. And if you didn't, go back to the beginning and redo it. But what we do is they have a set of blueprints. So let's say a gable house, 4 walls, and they look at that set of blueprints, and we've put notes on there, little tag notes. Okay. We've also handwritten what those notes say. We have recorded what those notes say, plus extra tips and tricks about that set of blueprints. Then you guys have made a video of those modules and those blueprints. And then, of course, they can open your software and they can practice it. So there's about 400 definitions before you ever start any of the modules. And then you open up that set of blueprints, and we'll tell you what words like gable in. And we have a definition for that. And you can click and it will audio tell you that. So I'm trying to hit all of the learning areas, whether you're viewing it, reading it, hearing it, listening to it. But then they can look at the demo of the software and they can actually practice it if they want. And then there's quizzes at the end of each one of those modules. And my goal is that when they get done, they could go out to a truss plant and they could say, yeah, I know what a gable is. I know what an
Yeah.
overhang. I know what the difference between an overhang and a cantilever is. They have knowledge before they get there. Now, you teach them whatever software you have. But so many times I had to back up and teach
Yes.
this to new designers before I ever went to teach them how the buttons worked. And
Hmm.
that I think is that foundation of knowing the knowledge of the truss industry before you start having to learn the software.
Absolutely. That's great. And that's timeless, right? And the software is going to change. The software is going to, buttons are going to move around the screen to
Right.
different places. But at the end of the day, that fundamental knowledge is really what needs to be there to make that designer proficient at what they do. I'm just curious, from your perspective, what is a word of advice, or what is something that you would encourage other upcoming designers to think about, or to focus on as they maybe are looking at getting this industry, or maybe have just started?
If you're already a designer, and I tell a lot of people that I train, go to job sites, get out there. If you saw somebody in the office that was doing a real complicated chopped up house, go to that job site, go out there and visit several times, get to understand what you did in the software to real application. Get to understand why that girder was there or why that floor truss system was done a certain way. Um, there's nothing like job sites, going there and understanding. You can be, told all day long what you need to learn, but once you go to the job site, it's just, I don't know, it's just a light bulb moment. And I've had it happen so many times for so many years that you just, like I said, I automatically always take someone to the job site when I'm training them because, like I said, especially like with my program, if you have no knowledge of what an interior wall is versus an exterior wall and why there's a difference between the two, I can tell you, but until you go put your hands on it and see it, that is when you start realizing, oh, okay, I understand that now. And like, within all the software, a wall is a wall, no matter who puts
Yeah.
it in how, or a pitch is a pitch. Just you got to understand it before you can actually do the application of it. So I think my biggest thing is pushing job sites. And one of the things I'm going to do more of, I have three little granddaughters, and I don't have any trust people coming up behind me, and so as a nana, I am hell bent determined I'm gonna make one of them girls a trussers. And so I'm gonna take them out to some job sites with me this summer and start doing some videos because I want them to know, even at a young age, but also for other people to know. I mean, it's my passion to said for I want everybody to be a truss designer. I think being in the truss business is the greatest thing in the world.
I love it, Sheila. I love it. So, speaking of becoming a trust designer, or even looking ahead in the next 5 years, what do you think some of the challenges are that our industry faces, or that, even if you think about the way that things are moving with technology, what do you think some of the challenges are that we need to be on the lookout for?
And that's a good question.
That's a harder one.
I know that's a good one. Um, I love technology. I mean, I always have. I love the whole AI thing and being able to change out hip stats without, having to redo the whole thing. Um, I think that once again, as I think of the generations now, the high school kids or those adults who lost a job and they need to find a job. I think this is a great industry to be in because you can be remote and do it from anywhere. But also, it's almost like I love the idea of AI, but I don't want to simplify the difficulty of what this industry is. Um, for instance, attic trusses. I mean,
Hmm.
you don't want to throw an attic truss up there and not put any extra loading in it, or put that attic
Hmm.
truss 6 feet on center and all of a sudden they frame it out for a bedroom. So there's some of that knowledge that I hope as we move forward into more technology, we don't forget to teach that part of it. I think
Yeah.
that'll always be necessary.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways AI is most powerful in the hands of somebody who has deep expertise,
Yes.
because it's going to cover a lot of the base cases for you. But it's really when you get to the point of seeing the edge cases and some of the things that only an expert would see to recognize, or knowing, kind of the difference between when it looks okay, but it's really not okay. And
Right.
finding that, I think, is quite important.
It would be nice if AI could do, say, optimization. That's one thing I see a
Yep.
lot of trust funds don't do. And when
Hmm.
you stop to think of optimization, even though it's maybe pennies and a few dollars here, in the long run, it's a lot of money, you can
Yeah, it
say.
adds up.
Well, it would be great if
Absolutely.
AI could maybe, pop up and go, whoa, wait a minute. If you redid this, this, and this, and these configurations, we could save, $6,307. And because a lot of truss designers, I know when I would train, let's say a house that's got 3 hips on it, and they'd be 3 different end jacks. And I'd be like, oh, no, no, no. We got to think
Yeah.
production while we're
Yep.
designing. So let's figure out which one we need to use. And that's the one they all are going to be like. But it would be nice if AI could do something like that. That would be great.
And I'm sure we're getting to that point, but I think part of it is, you have the expertise and you have the pattern recognition to say, "Oh, I've seen that before. I know that that's waste." So, finding that balance of, "Hey, we're moving quickly, but we're not being careless with our choices. We're not just letting the computer do everything." I
Right.
I think, just as we come to a close here, I'd love to hear, what are the things that keep you motivated, and what are the things that really excite you most and you love most about this industry?
I love this industry. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps now just thinking about it. Um, I get excited that knowing, and this is one of the things I told a friend of mine. I said, I want the generations coming out, when they're thinking about being a truss designer, they're not just designing a roof or designing a floor. They're designing, like someone's home. They're designing where, you know, someone brought their baby home and raised their child, or they're in a structure where, let's say, their grandparents passing and they're holding their hand as they pass away. They're building buildings that are so much more than just a building. And I think when they think about it like that, when they start realizing they need to have some connection to what they're designing. You know, I want to design everything so it stands up forever. I don't
Yeah,
want it to come down on
absolutely.
anyone. So, and there's a reason, there's people in there. But I also get so much joy out of passing a subdivision and going, look at that house. I designed the house. There's a scissor room inside that house,
Yeah,
and I think about the people living in that house. So I hope that part never goes away. As much as I probably have done different things in my life, I've always, no matter what, been some way connected to the trust industry, and it's a great industry. I just want more people to know about it. I want to get it out there to the public so people, teenagers, kids coming out of high school, kids who don't want to go to college, kids who want to learn trades, people who need a job, maybe they're still needing to take care of their family. Man, this is the industry to get into. I
I
don't think
love
that
it.
passion will ever die.
I love it. That's why it's such a pleasure to talk to you, because you can sense it and you can tell that you really mean it, and I love that. I'm gonna ask one more question that I may change the order of because I forgot to ask it. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on, like, room for innovation, inside the component industry. When you think of the things that we could do better, or the things that we could enhance, where does your where do your thoughts go when I mention that?
Wow. Things that we could do better in the component industry. That's a tough one. Equipment is evolving so quickly, and it's you know, to stackers, to, all kinds of
Yeah.
things. Even, like we were talking here, this Mark 8, there was a glide away, there was a hydroware rockaway,
Hmm.
how much it has evolved over the years to the point of being tables. Um, the component industry, I love the idea, um, you know, I've got a project right now with a group, and they have a carpentry group, and they're trying to figure out how can we make this carpentry group and the truss component group kind of one in
Yeah.
itself, because
Yeah.
I had with high school kids even when I owned my truss plant. One year they would build a house with components, and one year they would build a house stick frame. And when they built components, they would always come out to the truss plant, and we built roofs and floors, so we would talk about it. Um, I, as we get further and further and deeper in our industry, and we get all the advancements, I'm always going to go back to the foundation, never forgetting that, never forgetting. I mean, you could hand a kid a framing square right now, and they'd probably look at it like it was the telephone that you and I grew up in. Well, you're a lot younger than
Yeah.
I am, but we definitely had a dial phone. Um, and they look at a framing square and they're like, okay, no clue. And when they look at it, when you teach them all they can do with that, that's where I think our component industry is great and it's growing. And there's all the people, all the plate connector guys, all the software guys have such great minds, and they're going to if you can dream it, let's do it type of thing. But I'm always going to go back to the foundation, at least have a history of knowing the foundation. And I mean, like the connector plate, we had no idea that little connector plate 60, 70 years ago would be where it is today.
Yeah, absolutely. And in some ways it's still the same. It's very similar to to how it's been for a while. But it's all the innovation that has come up alongside of it to support the potential of, you know, what taking something like a simple piece of wood and a simple piece of metal and putting them together can do. And so, yeah, I think a lot about innovation, and especially in terms of what are the efficiency gains that we can have if we do things a little bit smarter, right? And some things is, yes, we want to invent something new, or we want to like create a new product, but at the end of the day there is a lot of room to enhance things by just thinking about it a little differently.
Optimizing, you know,
Hmm.
I bet you if you ask a handful of designers, do they optimize? Most of them will probably tell you no. They have no
Yeah.
idea and don't even think about it. And like I said, and I run into it because I deal a lot with small trust plants, but the Builders First Source, and I know those guys, and I know they have a division from what I understand, or they did years
Yeah.
ago. That's all those people did. When the design was
Hmm.
done, they did nothing but optimize. And they paid those people to do that because they saw the value in it. That kind of value has to be spread everywhere. And like you and I both have been to the BCMC show. Very seldom will you ever. I mean, I've demoed to thousands of people. Did I ever think to talk about optimizing that
Yeah.
trust and how much you can save by optimizing that trust? But it's
Absolutely.
a big thing. Yeah.
Well, I think that closes up our time here. I'm curious, from your perspective, and if you hear the words like the Common Chord, that was kind of a name that our company came up with by throwing around different ideas, but it means something unique to us. I'm curious what that phrase, the Common Chord, means to you.
I love that. You guys, that was just a great name and such a great play on our words. Um, Common Chord.
I just put you on the spot. That wasn't.
You did, didn't you? The first word that comes to my mind and may not really have anything is passion.
Yeah.
Most people, if you talk to them, they'll say the truss industry is like an addiction. You either get in or you get out. You don't just stay here and flounder around. And I think that's so true. You see it a lot at the BCMC show. Guys have been coming for. I mean, I went to my very first BCMC show was the very first one they had in 1980,
Wow.
and I've missed a few, but I haven't missed many. We used to have them twice a
Wow.
year, and was my favorite show of the year. I love going so that I could network and talk to all the guys that
Yeah.
that I've talked to throughout the years, and you see in this industry a passion, and that I hope will always be a common chord among all of us. that whether you're, Paragon or Mytek, Simpson, Eagle, Alpine, any of
Yeah.
them, we all will keep the passion for what is so desperately needed to bring the next generation up into our industry. So yeah, my word would be passion.
That's a great answer. I love that. Well, on that note, we'll close it down. Thank you so much, Sheila.
You, I appreciate it.